Welcome to the first session of our Virtual Production 201 series. I'm Katie Cole, Director of Product Marketing at Perforce Software, Virtual Production Evangelist, and member of the SMPTE Rapid Industry Solutions for Onset Virtual Production. The goal of this video series is to give anyone interested in running their own virtual production or who is going to be participating in a virtual production to not only give them a better idea of what to expect and how it'll work, but also give them the tools they need to have constructive conversations with others on the project. The series will cover a variety of topics from what you need to know in running a volume, to the hardware you'll be using, and much more. And today I'm joined by a group of panelist experts to discuss the Virtual Art Department, or the VAD for short, and the role it plays in a virtual production. So let's jump right in and meet our panelists. All right, so panelists, tell us who you are, the companies you represent, the types of virtual production projects you've worked on, and kind of the services you provide to those virtual productions. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with Igor.
Hi everyone, my name is Ihar Heneralau. I'm CEO and co-founder of ICVR. Our company focuses on game development and also on virtual production around for media entertainment industry. And as a part of VAD department, we've been hired primarily on the commercial projects. We did some episodic projects as well.
Great. Monica?
I'm Monica Hinden. I am executive producer and co-founder of Final Pixel. We're a virtual production studio specializing in end-to-end production basically from concept to final pixel. So we specialize in short form and advertising mostly. Our favorite kind of projects are when we are brought in from the beginning and produce the entire thing, including creating the content with our virtual art department, as well as managing the production and the full on-set team. However, we have plenty of partners that bring us in just as VAD. And so I'm eager to talk about that process with you.
Cool. Felix?
My name is Felix. I'm the CEO, creative director, and co-founder of Happy Mushroom. I was the virtual art department supervisor on The Mandalorian Season 1 and on Jungle Book. We've been privileged enough to work on film and TV shows for Marvel, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Plus, and WB. And so we specialize in applying virtual production to art departments and the talent and tools that are involved with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. And let's just get into the meat of the show, really. With how new virtual production is, it's really easy to come across many different definitions or expectations of what the role of the VAD will actually play in the production. And so I'd like to start off by asking you all, from your experiences, what is the role of the VAD in the virtual production? And Felix, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and kick us off here.
Similar to Previs, where Previs was born to breathe life into animation for the director, the VAD was born from having to breathe life to environments and lighting to give control to the art department, the production designer and art directors, and the DPs and cinematographers. So the VAD can be described as an art department with virtual production capabilities. And so when you work in the VAD, you'll have a lot of the same functions that you would have in an art department: 2D concept art, storyboards, all these essential parts to the pipeline. But then virtual production allows you to have real-time talent that's also going to grab that and in person at the speed of doing a sketch, design those sets, layout, lighting with the DP, etc. So in a sense, they're just responsible for designing the visual elements of a project.
And Ihar, I know that you and I had chatted previously just about, what concepts people might be able to use to be like, oh, the VAD is like blah. How would you describe the VAD to somebody?
I think like this, we started feeling ourselves a lot as a layout department, where like we've been engaged a lot by the previous team to build out the initial like rough layouts and like initial concepts, and push the assets to the end towards the post and visual effects, where like we have to extract the assets which were used for the virtual production on the camera VFX, and push it through to the final render for the compositing as well.
I'd like to double down on what Igor said. The VAD is really good at joining other art departments. If you have a team already, a pre-existing team in an art department, you could use a team that's a VAD to empower that team so that they can easily collaborate with other teams. So if you have a strong VAD, you have 3D capabilities, you could have virtual location scouting, you could have all these different tools that you might not have otherwise. So there's different ways to have a VAD join you. They could do the whole thing, or they could come in and supplement the things that you don't have.
Mm-hmm. I'd say on our end, since we specialize in advertising, so our whole pre-production process is maybe 6 weeks from green light to shoot. So our VAD takes on a lot. And I would say layout is key for us. Also, we're dealing with layers of clients so it's very important to rely on our VAD to create really great concept art and layout to get them on the same page with what we're producing, because what we're losing in this process in advertising is the fix it and post. We really need to get our clients on board from the very beginning. And so it's really crucial that our VAD, in connection with the production designer and the art team, are creating environments that our client approves and is on board with and not surprised with on set day. That's a big one.
I think you brought up a really good point, Monica. The VAD's function is not just to do the visual elements of a project. If you're empowering the production designer and the DP, or I'm sure you have art directors or those decision makers, the VAD's function is to plan the project. It's the production designer's role isn't just to create pretty images. It's to create the schedule that's going to get those pretty images to the final product, and the plan and building the teams. That's the function of the VAD. It's to help with either tech viz or a multitude of different techniques to create the visual elements and an plan on how to execute.
Absolutely. I think that's a key, that so many people think they can just pull a VAD in, get their environment and drop it into a project, and it doesn't work like that. They absolutely need to be integrated with the other teams, which I think we'll get into a little later, but agree 100%.
I agree. It definitely sounds like they are not a lone wolf. They are supporting whatever the initiatives are of the rest of the virtual production. So I think that's a great description of what they do. You know, they are the new art department. They can fill in lots of gaps with tech viz, pre-viz, location scouting, layout, all of those things. But let's speak.
Sorry, continue. No, I was going to add one more thing to that. In many ways, the director had this a long time ago with previs. I worked at the third floor for 10 years, right? Directors come in, they get previs, they get their animated characters, they could bid that out and create a movie. The VAD really came to raise those creatives, the DP and the production designer, up to where the director has been with previs, so that now they could have a similar conversation. The director has previs, he could bid that out, and the DP and the production designer has the VAD, and they could bid that out. And they could both see their work together in the same ecosystem thanks to virtual production. So that's why I feel so passionate about it. I really think it's an effective tool for that.
Like for commercial projects as well, like projects with shorter timeline, VAD team oftentimes kind of merges with the previs and tech viz team. And so while you building the rough layout, same time you're doing previs, the same time you're exploring, same time your concepts and the storyboards. And a lot of time do right now, like even 3D storyboards, which just like block outs. And then on that, we start laying up the cameras and kind of like expanding it and dressing up same time as we progress and all works through the story with the DP and directors.
But I think what Igor is saying too is the reason why you have to have a team that's I think I see a lot of people trying to just hodgepodge it. And yeah, if I get one environment artist and I shove them in here. The truth is, it's a planning role. It's not just a pretty pictures role. It's someone that could help with high level thinking. If you have the right VAD, you can go from being an art department that's producing work that is 2D to an art department that's producing the work at the quality of a James Cameron film, where he has a whole operation, right? So all of a sudden you could have tools that some of these really high level individuals have had at a very low cost. I've worked with those guys and they had that a long time ago.
I think that's actually a great transition. So you're talking about, hey, it's not just this one environment artist, it's a team of people and they help with planning. So let's talk a little bit more about the individual roles that make up a VAD. So Ihar, you mentioned when you are preparing a VAD service quote for a production, of course, the roles that you'll include in that production will depend on the specifics of the production. But you did mention earlier on another conversation that you had a minimum set of staff that would be a part of the virtual art department. Can you describe to us what that minimum staff would look like, what those roles would be?
So I think when we started virtual production like 3 years ago, VAD, specifically our VAD department would perform as a brain bar together with stage job and together with like even hardware. In some projects we did hardware design and infrastructure design. But in past year, like a year and a half, the roles starting to crystallize more. And kind of like what we talked in the previous on the previous question, that right now VAD team absolutely needs to have an art director. It's need to have somebody who is like role can vary. It's either like virtual production supervisor or CG supervisor. It's somebody who understands the full pipeline and the full workflow, how it looks, and can be of help to the production team and the director's team on to planning out the shots, planning out the execution of the environments, and actually what should be shot in camera VFX, or what we should do is like just a green plate behind, and what we can use just HDRIs versus like to which we absolutely need to build the full CG environments. Then it's absolutely needed environment artist or layout artist or level artist, depending on which team you look at, how you call them. But in a nutshell, they do pretty similar job in each one of them. Then lighting artist is extremely crucial and oftentimes overseen, and we see like a lot of clients who ask us what his function is around, because it's not something which is like, I think maybe people are familiar with. But the main part is an artist who specializes in lighting the scene and work together with the gaffer and the DP and the AC on how the light rig going to work for the production on the wall side, on the CG side, and how it will embed together with the physical lighting, and if there like any automation need to be done for the like DMX lighting, etc. And then for sure like 3D modelers who build the props and who build out kind of like the pieces of the environments itself. Then it can expand to the like concept artist, storyboard artist, and wherever like the need is, because again, like it's very new industry, and the productions oftentimes have various needs, and they don't fully like, even like when planning the project, and initially they don't fully see that, okay, we might need to do previews here, or we might need to do pass off the assets for the visual effects, or we need to fix something in post, so we'll need to render. So we have additional kind of functions coming from the team as well.
And Monica and Felix, what about you? Do you have like a standard set? If somebody needed VAD services from you, this would be a minimum that we would consider before taking on a production?
Absolutely. I mean, it's pretty much straight on with what Ihar said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to me, what I love the most, again, I'm managing a lot of client expectations in my role, is the lighting. I think agreed. It's unexpected, and people are surprised by seeing that maybe in the line item, but it becomes so crucial. And one of my favorite steps in pre-production, when we can do our pre-light with our DP virtually before we ever get on set, and we can walk our client through the lighting before we ever get on set, and it saves us so much time, because so many of our projects or clients are trying to get more for their money. So, oh, we can shoot 3 locations in one day. Great. But the only way we can achieve that is by doing all of this prep work. And for a year, my whole career, I've spent coming to set and client says, oh, that's not exactly what I was expecting to see, or, oh, that lighting's not exactly what I wanted.
Great.
And now what we're able to walk them through, not just with the environment, not just with props, but also with lighting, is exactly what they're going to see. And so we can walk on set and start rolling the second everyone's there. And that's a huge, huge savings for us, time and money.
I want to lean on what you just mentioned, Monica. I think get more for their money is right? And how are they doing that? When I think of breathing life to environments and lighting and empowering the production design and the DP, I think of myself when I was an environment artist and I didn't have this pipeline. And when I didn't have this pipeline, we created a bunch of previs where people, the production designer would come on board after the previs was created and literally tell me, hey, this is throwaway. At that point, I've already put hundreds of hours into those sets. Now that we're working directly with production designers and DPs, the production designer could create the world, which, hey, creating a whole world at photorealistic quality is very expensive. And that's a lot of what's happening in traditional VFX pipelines. They create all this work, unfortunately, and then it's never seen. However, if you grab a DP and he frames the camera for you in pre-production, all of a sudden, you have a very focused amount of work. And that's how the cost savings add up, because you know exactly where you're making. You know exactly how much it costs, which allows you to either cut down or increase if you need to. So I thought that was a really good point. Now, when I think of talent, there really is one role that goes throughout the whole pipeline for us, and then I'll mention what that pipeline is, and that's the art director. And connecting with that art director, that VAD art director, to the production design and the DP, the other roles come from that. Sometimes certain production designers are going to need location scouting, others won't. If you need location scouting, you're going to need a virtual production engineer. If the director of photography wants a virtual gaffer in the VAD, you're going to need a lighter. And of course, the set design, that's the biggest team. If you're doing set design, you're probably going to need 16, 20 people. So on the scales of the projects we're doing, that's the teams that we're putting together.
I forgot to add also one position though, which is like into.
What was that?
I forgot to add one, also another position which is like often being overseen at the engineering side, where like we can develop, and oftentimes we do develop specific tools for production around virtual camera or lighting or motion capture and whatever like the needs are. And oftentimes the creatives don't even know about the opportunity and possibilities which they have there. And so we often kind of add this line, and pretty much even in the early conversation with DPs, that the engineers are here to empower the creatives, and what can we do and kind of how can we push the boundaries of what you can do traditionally, like to achieve better results or like much fun, more fun experimentation. Right?
So who wants to summarize for me the roles they heard? Monica, would you be able to list them off?
In this last bit, we're finishing up this. No, let the guys take it. I'm gonna stand. There was a lot more than I tend to use.
So, because it sounded.
I'll start from the top. We have, if I was going to summarize the roles that are essential in the VAD, because of course it can expand from there, I would say that it's the person that's going to make the production designer happy. That's the VAD art director. The person that's going to make the DP happy. That's a VAD lighter. The person that's going to make the set designer happy, set designers, and or VAD photogrammetry talent. And then the people that are going to enable the virtual production pipeline. and the customization of that pipeline, because you don't grab a Jon Favreau and tell him you're going to work like we want you to work. You customize things to people. So those are the engineers and the tech artists, and they're the Wizards of Oz is what I call them, right? They're the guys behind the curtain. But I think that maybe summarizes the essential roles for me, at least. And then from there, there's a lot of other opportunities to, for example, in film, they call the backgrounds or the in-camera VFX environments, when you add animation to them, look alive, because you're making them look alive. So when you're doing a look alive to a set, you might introduce an effects artist, moving flags, particles, and or animators, people walking in the background, etc. From there, if you keep thinking about people, you start thinking about the storyboard artist, the model maker. You could definitely come up with other people to add to the pipeline as well.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think, Felix, what you said is actually a really great transition to our next topic, which is, you know, already mentioned this before, but the VAD is not a lone wolf. They need to be working in cooperation with the rest of the production. So I'm curious, who will the VAD work with, and when will they work with them? And if you want to break it down by the times in the production or roles, kind of like you were just doing, that would be really helpful, I think, for our audience.
Well, the VAD is here to empower the production designer and the DP predominantly, right? And so whoever they collaborate with, the VAD works with. So who does the production designer and the art directors work with? They work with the construction team. They work with the DP for camera. They work with the director. They work with, basically, those are the teams that the VAD art director would collaborate with, because if they're creating the visual elements, then they need to communicate with all the parties around to make sure that they're not only building visual elements, but that it's a plan that can be executed. So when I join a project, the first thing I try to think of is who are the people involved and who do they work with? Then I immediately know who I'm going to work with, because that's the responsibility. Now, when we're joining projects, one way for me to also frame that same question is, what are the stages on that project? And so there's 3 major stages that we have broken down the VAD into, and this could be different for different companies. This is how we have been doing it. And we break it into the design, right? During the design stage, you're really concerned. There's flexibility. People get to change everything. The DP is going to be able to explore different lighting scenarios. They're going to do tech viz. The production designer is going to want to explore different worlds. So the design stage is flexible and fun. But during that stage, you're going to budget it out, and it goes to the next stage, the construction stage. In the construction stage, you're really getting it to look final pixel or photoreal, or if it's for a game or whatever it is, you're making the product itself. During that stage, the production, the DP aren't as involved. They're very involved in the design stage, because once you know what you're going to make, they could step back a little bit and let the people build. And then the third stage is the final stage. How is it going to be used? Is it in-camera VFX? Maybe it's in-cam with a green screen. Maybe it's just passing it off to VFX because you wanted them to have the exact same set that the DP and the production designer designed. So between design, construction, and post or production, the common thread across the 3 is the VAD art director. The talent beneath them might change, because in pre-production, you're going to need designers. In construction, you're going to need people that could get things, like, they're not as worried about how the camera and the DP is going to, they're more worried about making it look really pretty and work for the shot. And then for the final stage, that's when you might have a couple members as a part of the brain bar. The brain bar is not an innate function from the VAD, but the brain bar is responsible for getting those worlds on the stage. And the person responsible for those visual elements is the production designer. So because he's responsible, he needs to collaborate with that brain bar. And many times what I see is a VAD either place a lighter and an art director in the brain bar, or basically place some of the roles that the production designer needs to guarantee that his creative vision and what he designed sometimes months ago is what comes out at the end. Because especially if you're using in-camera VFX, if you're just using it as a previs tool or as a tool for, then this is less of a concern. But especially if you're using it for in-camera VFX, you need to make sure that everything's ready and that that creative vision that they designed months ago comes out the way they wanted, because you don't want to have to redo that again. That's a lot of lost money. You just planned all this work to get a shot. Then if you don't get that shot, you have to redo that shot. That's an unexpected event that's a budget that you didn't account for, right? So that's why the preparation of things is so essential.
Felix, I have a question.
Please.
For your traditional production, how long of a window do you have for those first two parts of production, the design and then construction, as you put them?
You know, when we started Happy Mushroom 6 years ago, we had around 3. It was, you know, it went from like 6 to 8 weeks. That was the beginning. Now we get up to 10 months sometimes, especially we're doing 10 episodic series. We're doing films but the construction of the sets, you know, sometimes we're doing 150 environments, different lighting scenarios. Sorry, 150 versions, not like every one of them unique, but what tends to happen is you dedicate 5 to 8 weeks per set. And then they kind of stack. Maybe you could do 3 sets at a time, and once this one's out, you could tackle the next one. So in 5 to 8 weeks, you disseminate all the information that the production designer would want to put in there, that the DP wants to put in there, that the director, the producers, and you budget it out, and then you send it to the construction team, and then they take it the rest of the way. But during the design stage, if we're doing really small projects, it could be 3 to 8 weeks, right? But at a bigger scale, it's turned into like close to a year of pre-production.
Right, with that many. Interesting.
What about you, Monica? When are different roles brought in to the virtual production from the VAD, and who do they interact with?
Interesting, and it was interesting to see the calculation. It kind of ends up the same. Our projects in advertising, usually most commercials have 2 to 5 locations that we're creating, and our time scale is 6 to 8 weeks. So it's about the same. It was interesting to hear. For us, I would say the productions designer obviously is key, but again, depending on the creative, we're needing them involved from the very beginning, which in most commercials, they're not necessarily coming in at the very beginning when scripting is happening, but we need them, at least the key involved from the beginning. And I think as well, the director usually is involved relatively from the beginning, but we need their treatment kind of right away. Whereas that could come later if we all knew the locations. You know, we would get a location brief maybe before the treatment while it was still good, but it's really key to get that treatment before we really start digging in. And then the DP definitely needs to come in much earlier than I'm used to on commercial productions, making sure that they're seeing the environments, having any comments on the construction, even just where windows are or things like that. Just they might have some thoughts, and then getting them to pre-light before we're on stage. And we're finding we have some pushback from DPs that most are really excited. They all are, but some are like, why do I need to do this meeting? I'll be at the pre-light. It's like, no, trust us. This will make everyone's life, including yours, so much better. And so they're getting it. It's key to have them involved. And for us, again, like I said at the beginning, we specialize in end-to-end. Ideally, we're doing the entire production, but sometimes we're asked to just do the VAD and then, you know, collaborate with a stage that might have their own on-set team, their own brain bar. And so for us, it's key when we're doing that to make sure we have at least one person, generally it's VP supervisor or something, kind of the head of that department, involved in our VAD process from the very beginning, so that they're joining our meetings, they're recognizing any red flags with the equipment, they're ideally testing our scenes as we're building them, just looking for issues, and then ensuring that the transition, the handoff of the project from VAD to the brain bar is smooth. And to Felix's point, we absolutely require a representative from our VAD team on set, without a doubt. We won't do it without that.
But you brought up something very important. I think we've been talking about the VAD art director, but of course, I think if you're going to put together a VAD, you might want a VP supervisor that understands how to put it all together, right? So the VP supervisor and or producers, in my opinion, as essential as that VAD art director. I've been on projects where they haven't been needed because they're smaller scale, but one major difference, for example, with your workflow, Monica, that we have to account for is the treatments are never ready. They're never finished, ever. On film and TV, you're writing the script and you're doing the virtual production and the VAD at the same time.
Yeah.
This is where I believe the VAD is the most effective, in the unknowns, because what I experience now, especially with teams that have been doing it for years, is that the VAD sessions become a storytelling session where they don't have to just make up stuff and write it on paper. We have people showing them visually in real time. Oh, well, I thought this was going to be nighttime. Give me 2 seconds, right? So all of a sudden, I like calling it the sacred space. When you set up that sacred space where all of them know that they could throw ideas at the wall, then it becomes a meeting where you're telling a story. And I've seen writers in those meetings every single week rewriting scripts live and arriving at those decisions that maybe the director didn't want to make on his own. Maybe he needed the support of his production designer, his writer, his actor, all of them in there. And the VAD is excellent at facilitating those conversations.
And Monica, you and I had a conversation previously about kind of how in virtual productions, you have all of these ingredients, but you need somebody to know how to put all those ingredients together. And I think that echoes kind of what Felix was just saying about how you absolutely need a virtual production supervisor or somebody of the like that knows how to put the pieces together. Is that a fair representation?
Absolutely. I think it's something we're learning on every project and having to educate our clients on every project. It's defining at the beginning, who is that head that is keeping an eye on every step of the process. And the problem is, this is so new. There's not a lot of people that are capable of it. And the scary part is when someone comes in saying they're that person and they've never done it, because it is something you absolutely have to learn. You can't just sort it out. You know, I've produced a ton of things and therefore I can figure this out, because you need, you know, when we've been hired just as a VAD, we will actually provide them a full production schedule, even though it's including things that have nothing to do in theory with what we're doing. We need to be sure they understand the order of things that have to happen, the meetings that need to happen, the sign-offs that have to happen, so that what we're producing will actually be effective on set. And so oftentimes we're then brought in as that kind of connective tissue of kind of the virtual production consultant throughout the process. I think VP supervisor is a really broad term right now.
Oh, I was coming to say that exact same thing.
That person's in charge, because that person might be like, oh, no, I'm not in charge. What are you talking about? So I think it's a big conversation that the powers that be at the top of a project need to have immediately, in a very honest conversation of who understands this pipeline or who's deciding it. Because also everyone's pipeline's different. Like, who is deciding this and keeping an eye on every step of the way to ensure that all the groups are doing what they're supposed to do on time and connecting with each other correctly?
There's what you said there about the VP supervisor. I get that question all the time because I'm a VP supervisor, but I come from the art department, right? So I understand the domino effect of, like, if you do something here, when people ask me who is best suited to be a virtual production supervisor for an effective VAD, I the best role that I have found is the supervising art director in a normal art director, in a normal art department. Supervisor art directors, what their whole job is creating schedules and making sure that all the different pieces connect. And they understand what it means to get a physical set constructed for the day of the shoot. That is the same exact pipeline that a VAD.
And Ihar, you and I had discussed the idea of like getting specifications. As a VAD, there's certain information that you need from the team in advance to make sure that your work will be able to use in post or whatever it is. Can you talk a little bit more about that point?
Absolutely, and it's kind of also like on touch on what Monica was saying about in commercial. So we see more in TV and kind of episodic and film, where you have previews or creative. It's more baked, and DPs and creatives are coming on the project as early as possible, and they're already embedded into the team when we come in. On commercial side, it's really been a pretty like big battle with a lot of clients on having be hired oftentimes before the DP even is hired or selected on the project, or we hired before the VFX house is selected on the projects, and then kind of the specification on where like we know as a fact and based on our experience that some of the shots will need to be rendered out and sent for the post. Some of the shots won't be able to be fully executed on in-camera VFX. Some of the shots will have like additional lighting on top of it. But when we build design environments, we have no idea on what the visual effects pipeline is going to be looking like. And it's becoming a guessing game, and almost like it's my battle with the line producer, in which we requested on giving the schedule a budget on something we don't really know how it should look like. And we follow very similar workflow as Felix was saying about that. We do creative side first, and we call it pre-production, in our case called pre-production. And oftentimes we requiring clients give us the specification for the first thing, the hardware which you'll be dealing with on the set itself, the requirements from the DP or the lighting department, what will need to be as controls for the lighting sets, what will need to be done from the like camera moves, and specifically going back to what Felix was saying, that environment can be built in various different ways, and if you do a full landscape and photorealistic from each inch of it, it's gonna take us 5 years and a couple $1 million of budget. So we absolutely need to know the specific shots on which we'll be working in, because the environments will be dressed only for these shots with some room and some leeway to work around it. And the next part is like specifically what's going to be done next with the environments, and like are there any simulation going to be added, are they going to be re-rendered, are they going to be used in visual effects. And we saw a lot of projects where like we come in to the shoot is done, and then we receive a call from a post house or visual effects house saying like, oh, you guys worked on this, and you guys ship it to us, we have like additional visual effects shots, and we say this wasn't planned, so we need to rework half of that. So
hey, Ihar, can I ask you a question? Because you said the VAD customizes a lot of the tools for those creatives. I think one of the things that one of the reasons why the VAD exists and why, you know, it's out of necessity. VFX is daunting, it's overwhelming, right? So would you say that with your teams and Monica that the VAD is helping the art department or the production designers and the DPs work with those other teams with VFX, with in-camera VFX, like, because I tend to sometimes see it that way, like that's where it came from. They want to have that conversation, like a bridge between art department and VFX.
Mm-hmm.
So my personal feeling that one day hopefully we'll be merging with VFX, or VFX will be merging with the VAD department.
Oh, I'm the opposite. I'm merging with the art department. No, I
Well,
think
like we all
I'm just
did an
kidding.
immersion together. The art department, VAD, and visual effects. That's
the
become
truth.
probably should become one department, because in a way, from kind of like putting my producer hat, like their part about budget and schedule, which is like also becoming a conversation, and it's need to be a conversation between three departments on
Agree.
what's the most cost efficient to do, what's the most time efficient to do, and what's gonna look the best at the end of it, and which props I would do from practically, which props we put in the on the LED wall, or which props we composite in it, and what's our like ratio between the three departments to outcome into the best images possible. Because in a nutshell, like our goal is like to make it look beautiful and cool at the like whatever resolution we render in the final is.
You know, Igor, you're so right. I think we've talked a lot about the art department and the DPs, but the backbone of all of this, if you have a VFX department, is VFX. At the end of the day, if anything doesn't work, they got to fix it. So I do, although I've been very focused on the art department, the DP, the VFX team or the VFX supervisor is in every single conversation, right? You do want to expose the producer, the director, and the VFX supervisor. Like they're your decision makers. The production designer and the DP, they report to them. In this situation, every week they're going to have environments and lighting, and they could come up every week and show it to those guys, the producer, the VFX supervisor, and the director. And in those meetings, the way we've been structuring them, in those meetings, they get to have that sacred space in the conversation around how much is it going to cost? Does this serve the story? How do I do it in VFX? What shoot method is it going to be, in camera VFX or green screen, etc. So I really, that's a really freaking great point, Igor. I like that one.
And so I know we're running up on time, so I'd love to get just final thoughts from the panel here. And, you know, again, our goal here is to make sure that people that are doing their first virtual production are going to be part of a first virtual production, that they better understand what to expect, how it's going to work, have good conversations. So what is the one bit of advice that you would like for the audience to walk away with about knowing from the VAD? If you could summarize really quickly, just one thing that you want this audience to know about the VAD, what would it be? So who wants to start? Felix?
I would say, if you're a person, like if you're a company like ours, or if you're a person that wants to use the VAD, understand your decision makers' workflow and their review process. That's always the first step for us. Who are we going to do this for, and how do they like to review? When you understand the workflow, you understand who do you have to talk to, who do you have to work with. When you understand how they like to review, you understand how much time you have to add on top to how they like to review, because most likely they're going to need more time. And that's always my first step.
Monica, what about you?
Yeah, I would say something exactly similar that feeds into that as what I was saying earlier. Make sure we know who is running this thing. And that very much connects with who are the decision makers, what is the timeline, what is their process, because that has to be the base. But then someone that understands this pipeline and is in charge of it is building out the rest of it. I think you have to determine who that person is and trust them and build your schedule and plan around that. That's key.
Ihar?
I would say that the the key production roles need to be secured as early as possible. So that's as DP, art director, production designer, and they need to be in the same room from the beginning.
Yeah. So it really sounds like the VAD, again, cannot work in isolation, cannot be brought in earlier than the rest of the creative crew. It's really a collaboration between all the teams to make sure that the end result is what is needed for that final shot. Yeah, that's great. Well, I really appreciate all of my wonderful panelists joining for today's discussion on the VAD and how they fit into the virtual production. And I look forward to speaking to you all more in the future.
Have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.